1 second.
Don't do what Frankie and Johnny did. Don't be a moron with the money. Do what's right, you understand?
Yeah, of course.
Wait a minute. Do not act like Frankie and Johnny did. Do not be bad with the money. Do the right thing. Do you get it? Of course. Hollywood was caught off guard in May 2022. Ray Liotta, who was the driving force behind the movie Goodfellas, died suddenly at the age of 67 while working abroad. The news didn't seem real. He was busy shooting and seemed to be in a hurry. Even so, there was one haunting question that remained after all the shock and praise. What did really happen? There were no clear replies for almost a year. There was only talk and silence. When the official autopsy reports came out, they showed things that changed the whole conversation. What the doctors found was a lot more complicated than anyone thought it would be. The adoption that made everything possible. The story of Ray Liotta starts in 1954 in New Jersey, but it feels out of place right from the start. He was abandoned soon after birth and spent his first 6 months in an orphanage. Then Alfred and Mary Lita, a friendly working-class couple of Italian and Scottish descent, took him in and raised him as their own. Ray has always known that he was adopted. He even told everyone about it when he was a kid. One time he made it into a school show and tell. But it wasn't easy even though I knew. He was angry and confused underneath, especially at the real parents he never knew. In the end, that emotional edge was part of what made him so interesting on TV. The fact that his younger sister Linda was also adopted helped make things more normal in the family, but people still had questions. People who lived in the Liotta home in Union, New Jersey, were Roman Catholic, but not very religious. Ray did the basics, like confession and confirmation, but his faith was more of a background noise than something he did every day. It stayed with me though. Later in life, he admitted that those old prayers from childhood were the first thing he thought of when things felt unclear or heavy. Ray didn't have a clear plan after graduating from Union High School in 1973. He would later be recognized in the school's Hall of Fame. He didn't really want to go to college, and studies never seemed like his thing. He almost messed everything up by skipping his SATs because he was sure he would end up working in construction or some other physical job. His dad gave him some simple wisdom. Pick any class you want to take in college. He got to the University of Miami thanks to that lack of direction. Also, being an actress wasn't always their dream. In fact, he almost didn't mean to get into trouble. As Ray stood in line to register and looked at the standards, which included math and history, he felt resistance right away. After that, he saw a friend waiting in line for the theater department. He joined her on a whim. It began as a light, almost silly children's play, but it quickly turned into something more serious. It worked. He found a place where sense, feeling, and being there were more important than books. He finished with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in 1978, but not before singing and dancing in musicals as a child. This was very different from the intense character people would later associate him with on screen. Ray went right to New York City after college. Like a lot of young actors, Joey Perini on the soap series Another World. From 1978 to 1981, Ray was a big hit with fans. He wasn't seen as a tough guy, but as a friendly, sweet star. Joey was honest, faithful, and always falling in love, which could go badly. Years later, when Ray was on the Bonnie Hunt show, clips from those early days were shown to her, and she was shocked. It was almost strange to see himself play the clean-cut hero. Joey Perini was nothing like the unstable and risky characters that would become his trademark in movies. He was kind, humble, and loyal to his mother on the soap. But being on a soap opera meant that life was never easy. Joey's story turned into a full-on melodrama, with an emotional proposal followed by a sudden tragedy, a stay in the hospital where he fell in love with a nurse who turned out to be very rich, and a marriage that fell apart because of lies and secrets. It was an over-the-top intense story, and Ray leaned into every beat until the break almost fell. Ray Liotta had enough of her steady but limiting years on the soap series Another World. She finally broke. He took a standard risk in 1981 when he moved west to Los Angeles in search of something bigger, a real chance at movies. Of course, Hollywood wasn't made to be easy to get into. Often, the business prefers people with well-known last names and connections in the field. Talent is still important, but access generally determines who gets to be in the room. Ray got there the hard way. The first few years were tough. He got small parts whenever he could, like a short part in a TV version of Casablanca that didn't last long and a guest spot on St. Elsewhere. His job wasn't going anywhere, but it wasn't going anywhere either. He wasn't used to asking for help, and it took some persuasion before he even thought about calling Griffith. He didn't want help to get him ahead, he wanted to be successful on his own terms. Still, both of his publicly active parents told him a hard truth. To make progress, you have to pick up the phone sometimes. His acting class already knew about the part, but his agent wasn't able to set up a tryout. Griffith was already cast, so he had a lot of power and made it clear to director Jonathan Demme that he needed to meet Ray. It was that suggestion that opened the door. Ray felt tense and ready when he went to the interview. In front of Jeff Daniels, he put aside his fears, focused on the job, and gave a raw, explosive performance. He thought he had done everything he could when he left the room. Then they had to wait. Time went by. Faith gave waited out. By the middle of the week, he was already telling himself that this was just another missed chance and that time was running out. After that, the call came. She told him that the part was his. It felt good to let go after years of anger, waiting, and quiet faith finally paying off. Everything changed because of something crazy. Ray's performance was exciting, surprising, and hard to miss. Critics took notice right away. The business world did too. After that, Ray Liotta was nominated for a Golden Globe, and all of a sudden, everyone knew his name. But the attention brought a new worry. The intensity that made him stand out could also make him stuck in one. Ray had mixed views about that time in his life as he got older. He got the need to be careful, but he also saw the lost steam. He might have gone even further and faster in his career with the parts he turned down. He was led at the time by instinct rather than plan, though. And that sense, which was sometimes hesitant and sometimes brave, was what made the next few years so unpredictable and memorable. The risk that paid off. In the 1990 movie Goodfellas, Ray Liotta played the role of real-life mobster Henry Hill. The Martin Scorsese-directed movie would become a cultural landmark, praised by reviewers and audiences alike, and forever etched in the annals of film history. But getting that part wasn't a sure thing long before the praise started coming in. Scorsese became interested in Ray after seeing his powerful performance in Something Wild. Ray was able to get a meeting because of that image, but not a real audition. They didn't read lines, they just talked. It wasn't official, but it was intense and scary. There was a lot of competition for the part, and Ray knew it. Even though it didn't look like a process, there was a lot of pressure. After that, the real test came. In a place nobody expected it. In Venice, both men were working on different projects. Ray, wanting to stay in the public eye, tried to talk to Scorsese in a hotel hallway. At the time, things were tense around Scorsese, and security was on high alert. Ray only got a few steps before bodyguards stopped him and pushed him away. The two men looked at each other across the room. Ray didn't fight or try to grab the moment. He kept his cool, took in what was going on, and then quietly left. That short conversation without words stuck with Scorsese. Afterward, he said that Ray was already on his short list, but there was still one big problem. The part of Henry Hill wasn't like any other part. It was what held the whole movie together. Ray had to look real, act like she was innocent, and have enough charm to draw people into a world where violence and moral rot were common. He learned something important from seeing how Ray handled himself in that tense hallway area. Self-control, confidence, and not talking too much. That's when everything made sense. The fight wasn't over yet. Getting Warner Brothers to agree was a whole different problem. Irwin Winkler, the producer, wasn't sold. Ray wasn't a big enough name for the studio to use to promote a big release. Barbara DeFina, who has worked with Scorsese for a long time, says that directors wanted big names that would guarantee ticket sales. The other ideas were very different from each other. Later, Winkler said that names like Tom Cruise were talked about for Henry Hill and even Madonna was thought of for Karen. At one point, the project looked like it might stray too far from the grimy reality that would come to define it. Ree wouldn't go away quietly into the background. He finally talked to Winkler about his case when they ran into each other outside of a restaurant in Los Angeles. No, it wasn't pride. It was full confidence. He talked about why he knew what the job was and why he was the right person for it. Everything changed after that talk. The next morning, Winkler called Scorsese and told him he finally understood what the director had been trying to say. The studio wasn't fully sold even with Ray on board. Something